Hello and welcome to your second lesson in this section of the introduction unit. Hoe gaat het? I'm really curious if you can answer the question for me. So, hoe gaat het? All right. Het gaat goed met mij. Dankjewel. So, let's get started. In today's section, we're really going to focus on learning some new sentences about asking each other some questions, having a short conversation, being able to understand and have that short conversation. And then we'll go into a little bit of an introduction conversation. And with that, we also learn a few numbers and we will learn about introducing ourselves as well as part of your homework. So let's just get started. And we are first asking ourselves, who are you? We know how to introduce ourselves saying hi, goodbye, hallo, hoe gaat het? Goed, doei. And now we're going to ask ourselves who we are. So first, the questions. We have wie ben jij? Wie ben jij? Wie is who. That's a very important question word. One note on question words. As you will go through all the question words, they have the specific translation, the literal translation, but sometimes we phrase things differently than how English things are phrased. So you'll see that, for example, in our second question. Hoe heet jij? Hoe heet jij? Then technically that will translate to what are you called? Because in this case, the word hate is named, called. For us, we use that as a verb rather than who are you or what is your name. So this is more of a verb thing. So the second thing that you'll notice here is who actually means how. Just like we have the 5 W words with the question words, or 6 even, and there's one with the H. How? Same with this one. Who? It does sound like her, but it's only because the W is not audible in this word. So don't confuse those. So who is not her, it's how. But in this case, in English, it's phrased as what. Hoe heet jij? I've put this in there because people might ask you this question and slowly you'll get to recognize them. But essentially, it is been viewed by my students as one of the harder questions. So pick one of these 3 and just go with that, whatever floats your boat. So it doesn't really matter, they're interchangeable. Number 3, what is jouw naam? Wat is jouw naam? Wat is jouw naam? Obviously, this is the most easy to recognize and translate. What is your name? So we have wie ben jij? Hoe heet jij? Wat is jouw naam? So you can go over these, pause the videos if needed, and then we'll go to the answers. So if I ask wie ben jij? It has the ben in there, like the boy's name. And you can just answer with that. Ik ben Joyce. For example, wie ben jij? Ik ben Joyce. Heet jij? Ik heet Joyce. And then, wat is jouw naam? Mijn naam is Joyce. So you kind of refer them back. So what is your name? My name is. It's kind of the same thing as in English, so it's rather easy to understand and focus. Again, there's no really a big difference between these sentences. You can just pick and choose what you like. You can even sometimes just say, wat is jouw naam? And then just say, ik ben Joy. So you can mix and match them a bit as well if you like. It's not a huge problem. if you get stuck, if somebody says, "Hoe heet jij?" You're like, I don't know. Obviously, this is not the word hate. In Dutch, that's something different. So we now know how to ask for someone's name, and you know how to answer it. Big job. Well done. So let's move on to our next little conversation pointer. And before we do that, how do I say, how are you? Who are you? Hopefully you've kind of picked up on this as well. So there's three options. There's wie ben jij, hoe heet jij, en wat is jouw naam? Then it also says what is uw naam? I'm going to pause it for a second, but I'd like you to tell me what you think is the difference between jou and uw, even though they're both mean your in English. The difference is that jou is informal and uw is formal. So we have that big difference there, formal, informal. And formal is usually used in a respectful way. So you can use it for elderly to be respectful. You can use it in like business situations when you're trying to be respectful. So it's a very respectful thing to do. And if you're doubting the situation and what you need to say, then it's always best to say ooh, and then somebody would tell you, oh, you don't have to ooh me. You can just say yow or yai. So people will tell you. But that said, our culture is very, very informal. So most people will say yow. So that's the difference. And then how do you say I am and your name? That would be ik ben. Or you could have chosen from ik heet and my naam is. So let's move on to the next bit. So again, we start with our questions. This is the most common asked question. Hoe oud ben jij? So the OA or the OE in English is pronounced as the U, like the double O in Australian English. U. Hoe. This is ow, like ouch. Hoe oud. D sounds like a T. And on ben, jij. Jij sounds like a bit different to your I or I. It's more like an I. So it's as if it's literally an I and a Y from like a Y sound as such. So I. Let's see. Then we have wat is jouw leeftijd? So this is a W, so ow. And then we've got leeftijd. So basically you can see this as a T. And a double E sounds like the letter A. Wat is jouw leeftijd? Leeftijd means age. And looking at this, literally it will be lifetime. Tijd is time. So a lifetime, right? Because you age through life. You're hopefully living a whole lifetime, so that would be good. Wat is jouw leeftijd? Next. Wanneer ben jij geboren? And really watch your O's, especially if you're from Australia. They're really, I say it myself too, the O. We want to say the O. Make it like the alphabetic letter. So wanneer ben jij geboren? And here you can see that if we remove the E, it sounds like born. Geboren. Then our last question is wat is jouw geboortedatum? So datum comes from Latin, and is basically your date. Wat is jouw geboortedatum? So the best way to be able to read this is geboortedatum. So as I did it in the beginning, really use those syllables to make that conversation going. And if you say it quickly, it will help. So wat is jouw geboortedatum? So hopefully that helps. So these are the questions. Pause them if you need to. And then we're going into our answers. So a couple of different things that you can say here. I'm aware that we use numbers here. I'll go to the numbers 1 to 10 in a bit, but I'll explain it as I go. One thing that you need to know is that in the English language, you just have 1 to 10, and then you go 16, 18. So in the teens numbers, you start with the last number and then the teen. So you start with your 8 and then the 1. You start with your 6 and then the 1. Whereas if you go into your 20s, you suddenly say 25. So you start with your 2 and then with your 5. So it actually changes in English. In Dutch, we are actually consistent, I'd say. So we also say 16, starting with our 6 and then our 1. But also we don't say 26, starting with our 2 and then the 6. We start with 6 and 20. So we go back to front, but remain consistent in how we count in the teen numbers. So basically we say, I am 5 and 20 years. So it sounds like, ik ben 5 en 20 jaar. So the TIG, tig, is basically your TY, T. And for the 20s, just like it's not the 2 T's, it's 20s, and you can think about twins. So, ik ben 25 jaar. Make sure this is A, nice and long. So every time you see a double A, it's always long. Je A. Ik ben 25 jaar. Another note is jaar. I'm aware that you might not notice, but jaar is a singular, so it will be year. You could be inclined to say jaren, which would be the plural of year, but we don't use that when we use year for a number. Okay, so we just keep it as singular, so beware of that. Then we go back to our age. Mijn leeftijd is 34. So not 3, which is the number 3, just like it's also not 3T or something like it. We say 30, D-E-R. 34. Mijn leeftijd is 34. Also, a really good note is that when you use is in English, you can use is in Dutch. Same thing. All right, next one, I'm going to read out slow. Ik ben geboren op 5 au, same as the OU, augustus 1980. Ik ben geboren op 5 augustus 1980. En quick. Ik ben geboren op 5 augustus 1980. So it's 1980, same as English. And the last one, or the last option you can think about is mijn geboortedatum is 7, so 7 with a Z, 7 juni 1975. So this one remains the 70. Same in English. You will see that most of the numbers have a similar structure as we would refer to numbers in English as well. So the quick one. Mijn geboortedatum is 7 juni 1975. Done. So now we know how to ask for someone's age and we know how to answer it. Next up, so there's lots of questions. Feel free to rewatch this as well as you go, to come back to it, to listen to pronunciation. I'm just simply going to help you with your pronunciation, give you a little bit of nuggets where you can focus on. And the more you go over this, the more you practice this, the more you will see. So here I've chosen to put the question and answers together so you can get more into that conversation mode as such. Let's start. Waar kom je vandaan? Waar kom je vandaan? Waar is where, literally. And vandaan is the coming from part. Because this is a place that is not known yet, we have to add the daan. And usually van can be translated as from in different situations. Without being and getting too confused, it's best to just learn this phrase and go along with that. That's pretty much what it is and what we had to learn as well, learning English, for example. So let's say it a bit quicker. Waar kom je vandaan? Then rather than saying I am from, we say I come out. Ik kom uit Australië. So this is a bit of a harder word to say, this UI one, because out means out. If I put them next to each other, out, out. You might be finding it difficult to hear the distinction between these two words. You might even think they're the same, but they're not. The OU is the ow, and I'd like to invite you to watch what I'm doing here as well. Out. It's quite broad. And to the side when I say out, so the out in English, or the out in Dutch, like hoe oud ben jij? So that out, the old, is pronounced the same as out. I'm like outside. That is the same thing. This, however, even though it means out, we say it as uit. Out, out. It sounds really quickly like a police siren. So you go ow, ow, ow. So you go more like an ow rather than an ow. It's pretending to say an A and a U really quickly, separately, and then make them glide like a police siren. So that is something that you can keep in mind. And for those of you who have access to the pronunciation course, you will have that more thoroughly explained as well. As in regards to this one, if you see an IE together, and emphasis on the E is because normally you would pronounce this as an E, okay? Or the double E in English, same sound. But if there is an umlaut on the E, it sounds like a pause in the middle. So then it sounds like an E and an which is how an E sounds when it's at the end of a word. Like here, je. So it almost sounds like as if it's a U. And you kind of pretend that you add a little J here as well. So basically this umlaut could be a little J here. Let's listen. Austra, make it long. Australië. Australië. Pamper that really in there because it is a very common mistake to misread and mispronounce. They go like Australia. That's not how we say Australia. So a long A and je at the end. Cool. So ik kom uit Australië. And then if you want to specifically want to ask which country they're from, that's where the uit is as well. Uit welk land kom je? Welk is which. Uit welk land kom je? Uit welk land kom je? Then you can still answer the same way as to this question. So you just would say, ik kom uit Amerika. Amerika. Very good. Then last one. Wat is je nationaliteit? The EI, so the other way around to this one, has the same sound as the IJ, which is not, oh, here we go, it's here. Mijn land, mijn tijd. So actually, this sounds the same as tijd in Dutch for time, except this one has the short I, as we call it. This T, when you see vacation, rather than the T in English, it sounds more like a shush. Vacation. Nationality. We do it a bit similar. Nationaliteit. Instead of a sh, we go more like a ch. So a little bit more of a T sound there because we do love to pronounce our T's. So, wat is je nationaliteit? Nationaliteit. So really a ch in there. Nationaliteit. Nationaliteit. And then you answer, ik ben Australisch. Just an S like snake, not Australisch. That's German. So we don't do the sh sound when you see this. Back in the day, in like the golden age, it was pronounced more as a sh. I guess we got a bit lazy and it just sounds like an irregular S now, but with the old spelling. So, ik ben Australisch. Cool. Dat is mijn land. Again, go over these as much as you need and like, and we'll go through to the next bit, which is mijn adres. Here we go. Waar woon je? Waar woon je? Ik woon in Melbourne. So with places and stuff like that, if you're abroad, just say it the way that you do because it's your thing. If they don't understand, they will say so. But don't be afraid to just say it how you like to say it. So, waar woon je? If we look at the translation, you see that the do is not in there. So literally we say, where live you? So do is considered a verb. So technically you just replace do with live. And that's one of the things that we have in Dutch. We're very direct. We're very straight to the point. So we don't need that do. So any type of question where you have do plus another verb, you skip this do. So for example, we'll get there in a sec in what do you do? You've got two do's, just remove the one, and then that other do is translated as are do, if that makes sense. So where live you? Waar woon je? And then we can answer it, ik woon in Melbourne. Then we have the distinction between city and town and the distinction between this. I'll explain that in a sec. I'll read them for you first. In welke stad woon je? And in welk dorp woon je? So if we look at these, listen to the difference. Welke, welk. So as you can hear, I do say this E, welke. In English, we have a silent E. In Dutch, there's no silent E. It doesn't exist. We love to pronounce this E at the end. Welke. The reason why I have to write an E here, but not here, has to do with the noun, has to do with that city, stad, and the town, dorp. In Dutch, you might have seen it. I don't think we have seen it as much, but in English, there's only one article, the city, the town. In Dutch, there's two, de and het, de, het. I get a lot of the times a question what the difference is. Originally, de should be masculine and feminine, and het should be neutral. Realistically, I'm gonna leave it for now, but my big tip for now is knowing most words have de as an article, and remember the ones that have het as an article. If you do that, you don't have to remember a lot. You just remember the hets, and you can assume that the rest has just de. The other thing is that every single plural has de by default. Okay? All the plurals, no exceptions, will have de. So let's look at the example here. It's de stad, but het dorp. Okay? But if I want to make a plural and say towns, I would say de dorpen. Het dorp, de dorpen. So that's the difference. And as you can see, de ends in an E. It kind of thinks it's really important, and therefore it wants the E still there and be present. So all the words with de get an extra E. Welke stad? De stad. Welk dorp? Het dorp. And both these questions you can go and answer with the same answer to waar woon je? Ik woon in New York. Lastly, we have the street question. In welke straat woon je? Now, if you paid attention, you already know what article straat has. Do you think it's de or het? It should be de because it has the E from the de right here. De straat. In welke straat woon je? So in which street do you live? Same as you would say, in what street do you live? We still use welke. And then again, you use the same phrase, very easy, but you just add in what street we live. So we live in a street rather than on the street. For us, on the street is like being homeless. So we live in a street, in a house, if that makes sense. Ik woon in de Kerkstraat. Kerk obviously means church. And notice how we write them in one word. So the straat is attached to the actual name of the street as well. Ik woon in de Kerkstraat. Fantastisch. All right. Ooh, hopefully we're going great. I'm just going to go ahead with a few more other things and then we'll head into our conversations. All right. Also very interesting is to look at the spelling of words, right? We don't like our doubles at all. Wat is je adres? So what is your address? Wat is je adres? Our emphasis is on dress. Not address, maar adres. Can you hear the difference? Adres, address. So usually words in Dutch have an emphasis on the second syllable rather than the first. which also makes it a bit more easy to read, as well as sound more authentic. Then, mijn adres is Hoofdstraat 11, like the ferry. Hoofd means head. So basically, when you see Hoofdstraat, it's like your main street or high street, I guess. Main street mostly. Mijn adres is Hoofdstraat 11. Then, wat is je postcode? But not postcode, because we do like our E's. Wat is je postcode? Mijn postcode is 5134 AN. Mijn postcode is 5134 AM. Wat is je telefoonnummer? Telefoonnummer. Telefoonnummer. Mijn telefoonnummer is 0612345678. Just leave that for now because we are going into our numbers and you can actually see the written ones. But this is what we'll stay at. So very exciting. Mijn telefoonnummer is 0612345678. So we usually split them up in pairs. Okay, again, positive needed. This is basically just a run through the pronunciation you're repeating. And then with our extra exercises, you're able to kind of remember them. But when we look at this, you can see that there's a lot of similarities, right? Telephone, this is even the same, but just a Dutch pronunciation. So keep that in mind. Okay, werk. So not work, twerk. So it sounds like a lot of people say twerk without the T, work, and make it sound like the work, but it's an eh here. I want to hear a clear eh. The werk. Not work, werk. So focus on that. It's a very common mistake. So take that with you as you go. All right, so let's go through these. Wat, stu, u, like a stew almost, but without the w sound at the end. So stew, but take the W sound a bit away. Stu, not stew, stu, dear je. Wat studeer je? In this case, it's not an A sound as such, but more like EA, like, oh dear, wat studeer je? If that helps. Wat studeer je? So focus on the dear and remember the U sound. Ik studeer Nederlands. If you add the S, we're talking about Dutch, the language, or Dutch people. So I could say, I am Dutch. You can even try and say that. Because we already know I am from I am Joyce. Ik ben Nederlands. Without the S, it's the country. So I keep that in mind. Ik studeer Nederlands. Then the word beroep is profession. It has the word beroep in it, which means I call or I call out. So basically, what is your calling? I really like this word for that particular reason. Not because, your work should be your calling, but ideally, this is me. It is fun when you get to do what you love. Like I would say this is my calling. Dit is mijn beroep. Wat is jouw beroep? Again, focus on the U. Wat is jouw beroep? Then we can just use I am as an answer. So I could say, ik ben lerares. Again, this is considered a long A. lerares. I adjusted it to female because we do make gender relevant words. So if I just skip the AS and say ik ben leraar, then I'm saying I'm a male teacher. So now I'm saying ik ben lerares, which is female teacher. Then another question you could ask, and this is what I said before with what do you do? Skip this do basically. It's always the first do that you skip, and then you move the verb to this place. Wat doe je? You could also see this question as like, oh, what are you doing? Wat doe je? Like if I see you and you're doing something, and I'm like, oh, wat doe je? But if you're introducing each other and I would ask you, wat doe je? Then I'm actually meaning, wat doe je voor werk? So what do you do for work, right? But we can leave the voor werk out if the context is clear. So, wat doe je? And then I could say, ik ben marketeer. Bit of a different spelling, but ik ben marketeer. Also, we don't always have to use the a as such when we talk about our professions. Some do, some don't, and sometimes you have to. But yeah, that's it. Okay, let's lastly go through the numbers before we head into our conversations. So I've added here the numbers 1 through 15 as a bit of a guidance as well. Cool. So here are the numbers written out. Okay, I'm gonna say them slowly, and I invite you to repeat them as you go. 1. These things are here on there because you really have to say A in this case. 1. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. CH sounds the same as a G. Same sound. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. I've counted till 15 right now because I really would like you to see that from then on, the number will be the same. So, 6, so 16 will be 6, 10, 16, 17, 17. Then I haven't had 20, which I'm actually going to do now. So if you look at 20, you can also see that it's 20. I'll go a bit more in the older numbers as we go, but the tig here is basically your GY, if that makes sense. So 20, you can write that down if you like. So 20 is 20. Now with the ge, you will hear that a lot. The same with the goed. It's a more of a gurgly thing. It's almost as if you want to clear your throat, right? Goed. Or what I see a lot like with good, they make it more sound like a K. So like goed or so. I can't do it. It's really hard, but they make it sound like a K, and you want to k, but then you want to remove the k sound. So no k. You can be in Amsterdam and say 20, or I say it softer. That might help you as well. And you can say 20. 20. It's very soft. So that might be easier on the throat as well. All right, cool. These are the numbers. Now we're getting into our conversations. So if you want, go over this material as well by rewinding the video, and then we'll go into our conversation so that you're nice and ready. All right.